This is the 3D holder. Again, this is an older one here. And that's actually not the one I just showed you. That one is this one. Like this. This has got actually some gizmos to move it around. I think this is the even older one. This has got the knobs you grab. So, like if you're doing figure skates and hockey skates, they have a different Z height. Hockey's around 110 thou, and then figures might be 230, 240, 250, 260, depending on the type of blade. And so you have two fixtures to go back and forth. So you don't have to mess with the fixtures. And if you go through and look at this, this is even another Wissota one called the tangent finder, where you went through and you have a Z height like this. Then you lock it down. There's these two lock the plate down. And then you went through and this is another one, is a fine adjust. You can do this, which replaces this. I actually like the new one better. This has got less to fiddle with, but this was a little bit more of a kludge on here to lift this up and down. And also, there was no adjustment side to side on this, so you're laying it just on the, if the pads are a little bit off. The older unit is, actually there's a lot of these still around. It's not bad. It's an improvement over this ancient design like this, the tangent finder. And then this is a modern 3D skate holder. Now when you get into things like figure skates, you can get a pair of figure skates here. And the blade is thicker. This blade here physically is thicker than a hockey skate. And there are some weird hockey skates out there. There's a Hespliero brand that this joker here, these are actually now made in China. The blade is kind of a goofy thing, and it's very thick. And I don't know if they just did that because they ran out of material, but you got to be careful. So if you have an oddball skate that has a different thickness, you can just go ahead and mark it on the darn boot. You got to be kind of a hard ass about that, because you know what you'll do is you put in a skate sharpening machine, and next it's going to ride high, and then you have to completely mess around with the controls on it, or you're going to give a guy a bad set of skates because it's off. Figure skates on here, because they're thicker, the blade's going to be up higher. So what you have to do is you have to drop it down. And so Wissota does make a holder just for figure skates. And it looks like, lo and behold, looks like this joker. And it's really the same base if you look at it. This is the same. This is slightly different. The plate is longer. You can use this for figure skates. If you have two holders and you do a lot of times the setup, you have one for hockey, one for figure skates. Or you can completely turn the dials up, but you should kind of know where you are. And so the threads on all three of these are the same, so you turn these to go up or down. And I was looking at another video, and I guess I have these the zeros all about at the 11 o'clock position. And I was looking at one of the Wissota videos, it was out a couple weeks ago, and then I noticed they had these, which I guess it's taken me a few years to see that. But anyways, it was just, for my brain, it was better to look at them like they're clock dials. So my own thing is that whatever was here, I was assuming there's a 1 and there's a 1. That's how I have my dial set up. But this is for figures. You generally can set this lower. It's got a longer piece here to grab a figure skate blade, because figure skate blades are a lot of times longer like this. A lot of these figure skates are 7/16, but you got to be careful. A lot of the figure skates here, this is called a non-skating zone. When you take the toe pick, you put a metal plate, this area here is non-skatable, because the ice will touch that. You really, on a figure skate, you really don't want to sit there and try to change a profile, because you're going to ruin a good set of skates, and it's probably better not to fool with them unless you have some crummy pairs to experiment with and learn, because a set of figure skate blades can cost more than an entire set of hockey skates. There's some incredibly expensive blades. These are gold seals on here. And then this has chrome, and so this actually has a bevel in here like this, inward. So this edge doesn't go to a point here, so you don't really want to side hone this like I need to do on that set of hockey skates that I just did, because if you do, you're going to scratch up the chrome. The reason there's chrome on here is these are high carbon steel blades, maybe 1080, 1095, something like that, and they're going to rust. And so generally, some of these are 440s in some brands, stainless, but a lot of these are carbon steel, so you don't want to have them rust. So they're like the old hockey skates were from the 80s and say the 70s and things like that. So there's a lot of weird things. The Wissota is a good machine in the sense that it's inexpensive to use to do a lot of skates. It's not fully automatic in the sense that you got to have, you know, some common sense when you do it. But you're not really messing around adjusting the Z height on this thing all the time. I guess that once it's set, I may do a minor tweak because I've mistakenly touched it, or, you know, Kilroy factor, you let somebody use it, they're going to probably goof it up. They can goof it up. So that's not trying to be negative about it, but that's just the fact of life. You can get somebody who wants little kids and they'll mess up anything. But once it's dialed in, the only time I really had changed this is when I had a set of figure skates that were taller or thicker, and I had to drop this down. And then you turn this down, see it says down here, in equal amounts. So if I was going to turn this dial this way, I could move the 0 to be over here, 0 to be over here, 0 down over here. This whole thing drops down. You don't have to mess with the tilt or anything because it all goes down together. These threads are all the same. I think they're quarter 28, quarter 32, there's something like that. If you get a weird pair of skates like this is from supposedly 100 years ago. This is a set of Jackson Hines. Looks like a Santa Claus skate. It's actually thicker at the bottom than it is at the top. Now that type of blade is not going to go in here. It's going to be totally goofed up because it's tilted. So if you put both that holder in there, it's going to be fairly perpendicular in most skate holders, but you're basically contacting this edge and hopefully this edge, but this is rounded. This holder like this and a lot of other holders are designed to have for a flat skate. And so when you get in figure skates like this is actually wedge shaped for lightness. This is actually made in Germany. And that means rail hard in German. I think it means rail hard. And these are actually, strangely, their max thickness is here, then they get thinner. So this weird blade has actually got thin, thick here, and back to thin, and it's thick here, and when you drop down it's thin. So the sharpening marks on these actually look like it was run with an old wheel before any of us were born this way. So the wheel's spinning. It may have been. This has got a little bit of a radius of hollow, not much. But the marks on there are just really oddball in the sense they're done probably with a wheel running the other way. So I'm not sure how in the world you're going to hold this in a clamp. You're going to have to really experiment. So figure skates is a whole different animal. You got some weird skates like this. Those go on shoes. They're the same things. They're thicker here, thinner at the top. So those are not going to go, that won't even fit in the holder there, but this type of thing that would fit in the holder, if this touched the flat, it's going to be tilted. So if you put that on the holder there, you probably could align this with the Wissota, but you're going to have to go through and turn this and bowl it over, which you could do with the looking at the edge checker to make it match that. Or you could go through on this and measure the height along this weird hook to the surface. But if you just bolt this in here like this, you're going to get some really weird whoop-de-doo because it's going to be tilted like that. But regular figure skates, this works pretty well. Again, these are the ones that this brand here, made in China. I think it's an old brand name from the Dark Ages. But these are actually made in China. And the blades on these, for some reason, are thicker. Maybe just in production they went ahead and just grabbed some thicker steel just to make production meet. But those skates there are about 20 thousandths thicker than normal skate. So if you put it in here, it's going to be off. Same thing if somebody has a holder like this and they say, oh, sharpen some skates. You really need to know, does this guy set this up for hockey skates? If he's got it set up for hockey skates, most blades are going to be like this one here. It's the 110, 115 thousandths blade. Very common. And so a lot of times I'll mic it just to make sure. So investing in a little micrometer sometimes can help. This is a caliper actually. This caliper here is just one from Harbor Freight or whatever. Downside of one of these things, actually, it's English metric, so you can switch between the two. If you leave the batteries in, it's going to drain, because the switch here is not a physical on-off switch. This is basically turning the software on for the LCD. That's why I leave the battery out. But I'll use one of those and I'll go through and sometimes it's an unknown set of skates. I'll go through and mark the size actually on there. And a lot of these I'll set up all to 5/8. Some people like to use 9/16. All depends on the rink, temperature of the ice. If you got a bunch of kids' skates, bunch of skates you want to do, and you don't want to sit there and change the dressing, you may want to take all the skates and put the skates are going to be 5/8 in a pile. The ones are 9/16 in a pile, 1/2 inch. If you really have to goof around and change it, and then you can go through and dress this, go ahead and do a couple skates, and then go ahead and change the radius for the batch that's whatever. I think people are a little bit nuts in the sense that A small change will make a difference if you really skate a lot. If you don't skate that much, you're really probably chasing your tail trying to change the radius a bunch. It's better for some people to get a radius that's going to work intermediate and get some more skating in before you sit there. And it's like getting in the old film days. If you sit there, every other roll of film is a different roll, you're never going to get good. So when these are shipped, they come out with a 5/8 inch radius. There's a 1/2 3/8, and that's the swing on this from this pivot point to a line in here. Now, another word of caution, any machine, what I call a classical machine, tabletop, they're going to have a gizmo like this to dress the wheel. Doesn't matter if it's Wissota, the other brands, Easy Sharp, SSM, a bunch of brands, what do you call it, Blackstone, whatever. Anything that has a stone like this, you got to be careful that some idiot hasn't come over here, I'll use the word idiot, and turn this. You want to kind of see before you turn it on, you're not going to ruin the diamond. If you go ahead and have this thing cranked in, somebody's sitting there playing this Beavis and Butthead, and they turn this thing, you pull this forward, you turn this on, you're going to break the diamond. And that's what happens in a rental situation. Rental situation, or in a communal rink where you got too many people pulling with the skate holder. A lot of times you got to have another one of these locked up because it's going to get busted. So when they ship this, of course, they've got this thing wrapped up with an extension cord in the Wissota box, which is good, so it's never going to get torn up. But you know, if you move this thing around, or you got somebody you don't, you know, just curious, they want, oh, what's the knob do? And they turn this thing and slide this over. I keep this kind of snug, but not totally snug, because I'm generally the only one who uses this. I'll go through here and, you know, I got to dress the wheel sometimes. But you just got to be aware that that's a failure mode that can happen. Of course, that's a gizmo to catch the sparks, and you can adjust this thing around and flip it around in 2 different sides to get it close. And when you sharpen a bunch of skates, this edge right here, right there, that's going to go to flat. So you have a radius, a flat, a radius. So if you sharpen one pair of skates and another pair and another pair, that's no longer a 5/8 inch radius. So you're fooling yourself by sitting there and doing 10 pairs of skates. It's not even going to be any radius. So every now and then you need to go through and dress this a little bit. You're trying to be really cheap about it. You could go ahead and get a gizmo and actually measure the radius of curvature, but you shouldn't sit there and sharpen gobs and gobs and gobs of skates and not dress this. Some people go overkill and, you know, dress it every 4th or 5th pass. I think you can get by at least 10 or 15. It kind of depends how well they're screwed up or whatever, but personal preference. So just be aware that if somebody sits there and keeps on sharpening in this, they may have a rule. Some places I worked at, California, they had a rink where they had this locked up because it got broken. It was an old Wissota, the model S8, I think they had. And what would happen is they had this thing chained up, and so they'd sharpen the wheel and let some guys just sharpen it with, not this holder, it was one of these older holders, and it was more goober proof. It wouldn't get torn up. But what would happen is this thing would actually have a divot in it. It had a hole. Instead of being a radius, it was the opposite. So you couldn't skate on the skates at all. So they'd have to get the guy in the know, or when I started to work there, and cut this off, and then, you know, let the guy only do it for so many passes or get him trained right. But that's what can happen on a conventional skate sharpener with the gizmo like this. It doesn't matter what brand it is. Anything that you've got a gizmo, you can dress the stone like that. If it's got too much of a it's got too much of a contact, it's going to bust the stone off. Now the old Wissota, I want to say there was a model S8 for skate sharpener 8. They had a smaller motor on it, and I think it used to vibrate more. This one's really locked lock solid on there. The way this is in here, this motor is actually in a clamp here, so they adjust the Z height of this on here. And I believe there's a nut under here. If you actually had another holder that was not, you know, a different Z height, you could theoretically undo this and lift this up and down. You may want to call them and ask, but I'm pretty sure that's what, you know, they used to do in some other places. You'd go ahead and undo this and adjust the Z height. There is a little bit of adjustment, but skate holders are not, different brands can have different Z heights. When I say Z height, between the work surface of a conventional type to here, it's not always consistent. And so, you know, if you had one of these locked up or somebody grabs one, you get one off eBay. If it's a Wissota 3D, it's going to be in the range to fit this. Also, the older Wissota ones like this, they all will tend to work on this. And I think they've kept the same height because the same holder here was used on the old, I think one of them on the old S8 that they had. And they've had, this has got the smaller diameter mounting hole. I think the old one used a more conventional stone on there. But the stones are actually not the biggest part of the time. The biggest thing in sharpening skates is really the time and not getting stuff screwed up, in the sense that, you know, make sure your holders are lined up. You know, nobody's mess with it. Put the skate in here. I prefer to put it in this way. Skate over. And when you've got done here, you go through and you'll have a burr on here. I knocked that off with a stone on either side. And I also put the date on there when I did them, just for my own reference. Okay, since we're talking about zillions of different types of skate holders, here's one that's made in Canada, ISIM. I think this is pre-Blackstone. You can look here in the side, this is actually a little bit taller than this. Now, what they did on this one is you lift this edge up with the two screws on here. But there's a limit at which it'll go. This is some old stuff I got. So this tilt is by lifting this up and down, the tilt this way. There's the plate. Then you have the plate undone. Let's see how far we can go down. And maybe as low as it'll go. And then the low as it'll go, this looks to be a little bit higher than this. You can see where somebody hit this with the grinding wheel. Things are not doofus proof. And this old system here, there's another one that'll go in. So you got the Ice Capades K2. And this is for a different type of skate. All this stuff's from Los Angeles. And I think I got that backwards in there. Okay, this is a tech tip here on the clamp. All the clamp's got to do is clamp the skate blade. It's got to be snug. You don't really want to go totally nuts and make this really tight. If you do, in any of these type of holders, you can bend this. And so it'll get to where the little piece won't go in here like this, because this has got such a bend to it. So what they've done on here, they put a smaller knob, which is good. You don't really want a cheater bar in here and wail on this thing and bend the crap out of it, because you'll yield it. And so this is cast iron. It will actually have some bend. I think it's wrought iron, but it will bend some. And so that's what can happen on these. Okay, on this pre-Blackstone holder here by TSIM, I think. This is the, I think this is for, or is it ISIM? I think this became Blackstone. This gizmo here was used, which bears against these plates, so you can sit there and do a tilt, and these screws move up and down. And then there's the holder that holds the top plate on. Now they had another way to use this is you just use this thing and you don't mess with the tilt, because you use the machining. Here's Ice Capades K2, and it just bears up against metal to metal. So it's machined in place, tighten this down, that's it. And then this piece here bolted on this. And then you've got the holder that comes in like on top of here. And they have a whole bunch of different widths on these holders for different skates. There's two of them like that. Get some narrow ones. All this stuff's a little bit dirty. It just jams in here like this. So you're not using the leveling screws. Got the surface just parallel to this by machining. Then you got one of these that slides in there. I've got the wrong, this piece here, it's got to swap that on that red one. But it goes on here like this to bear down. Whole system of these things. And there's a bunch of different types here because of all the different types of figure skating blades that would go on here. This bears onto here. Flips around like that. And this particular one goes on the thinner holder over here. So you got to take that piece, put it on here. So you got a whole bunch of different kits of parts. So figure skating can be more elaborate to where you got all different types of holders for different types of skates, and after a while some of those skates tend to be obsolete, in the sense they had some blades for patch sessions that were thinner. I think the same thickness as hockey skates, not really used as much anymore. So that's just a bunch of old stuff.